The title of my presentation today is Identification of Sea Surface Temperature and Sea Surface Salinity Fronts along the California Coast. Application using Saildrone and Satellite-Derived products. I really want to also thank, as this was a real team effort, the co-authors, Marisol Garcia Reyes at the Farallon Institute and Professor Jose Gomez Valdez at the Successi Institute in Baja California in Mexico. Thank you. So just a brief background, why are fronts important? Well, there are two major components to that. One is obviously the atmospheric ocean coupling, which is critical in terms of understanding, the impacts of climate and how they're changing. So fronts are critical in that respect. And one of the original individuals that worked on that was Dudley Shelton, who showed this correlation between wind stress and also sea surface temperature fronts off of Baja California. And then the second reason is obviously fronts are associated with major upwelling zones and submesoscale variability. Obviously, upwelling is associated with the biology, fisheries, productivity. So that's a huge component in terms of the issue of biodiversity. So fronts have a huge part to play in also identifying these changes in productivity and ocean biology. And we're going to focus this paper actually on looking at sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity fronts off the Baja California coast. But also we're going to look at just some examples also in the Arctic. I'm just going to show those examples in the Arctic as motivation for future work that's going on right now. But I wanted to actually again show you those examples because I think it's very exciting. Also the application in the Arctic. Again, so the focus will be on examining sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity fronts off the Baja California coast. And also we're going to apply wavelets, the wavelet methodology to actually look at the actual spatial scales of these fronts and see if they make any sense with respect to the known dynamics in those regions. So just a brief outline, we're going to examine again the examples of satellite-derived sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity in two regions of the world's oceans, the California/Baja coast off the western North American coast, and also the Arctic, off the Alaskan coast. Again, the number two is just kind of very preliminary right now as that's ongoing research, but I think it provides really nice motivation for future research in that area. And we're going to use the Saildrone uncrewed vehicle to actually do the comparisons directly with the satellite-derived products. I think Saildrone, as I know I've mentioned in the past a lot, is a unique technology and unique capability, especially for validating fronts in the ocean. And we're going to be applying, again, the wavelets methodology to actually identify the spatial scales of these fronts along the California Baja coast to see if they're consistent with the known dynamics along the coast. For those that maybe not familiar with the Saildrone is an uncrewed drone. It basically can be controlled from land, so it has this unique capability that if a satellite tells us there are fronts in these areas, Saildrone can be guided directly, to those fronts. So it's a unique, I think, instrument and technology for being able to validate gradients. Saildrone has multiple instruments on board. We're going to focus on the derivation of sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity from the conductivity temperature depth instrument. But Saildrone has, again, other instruments on board. It has an infrared pyrometer. It has, it can measure winds. It can also measure vertical velocities and horizontal velocities. It has an ADCP, an advanced Doppler current profiler, on board also. Those are just some of the instruments that Saildrone carries. And so it's a very, very unique technology for being able to actually validate and also examine, fronts in the ocean. So this is just kind of an example I wanted to throw out. The upper left-hand panel, number A, are sea surface temperature gradients averaged between June and September of 2018. The upper right-hand corner, B, are sea surface temperature gradients for January of 2018. And the lower left-hand corner is number panel C, or the derived sea surface salinity from the JPL SMAP product, derived from the soil moisture active passive NASA mission. Again, sea surface salinity gradients. The lower right-hand corner, panel D, are the same sea surface salinity gradients derived from from SMAP, but from the remote sensing systems product. And one of the first things you'll notice is, in terms of the sea surface temperature gradients, for June to September, you'll notice these large gradients along the coast, especially in Northern California, and as you enter Oregon also. Those are consistent with what we know are the major upwelling seasons off of California, which occur during the summertime. And you also see some of these large gradients along the Baja California and Mexican coast. So that's also consistent with where we know, some some gradients and some also frontal features exist. And the right-hand upper panel, panel B, is for January again, and you don't see those dramatic features associated with the upwelling, basically because, again, January is not the major upwelling month, for a season, off of California. The lower panels, again, show the sea surface salinity, which you clearly see the gradients associated with the upwelling zones, but you don't see them in the southern part. And this is basically because, the land contamination issue and the L-band radiometer associated with the derivations from the SMAP satellite and salinity. But it's very, very encouraging. I think this is fantastic that you see the sea surface salinity gradients also associated with the major upwelling fronts in the northern part of California. So this, again, one of the major conclusions from this, just from looking at these slides from a very high level, is resolution matters in determining also these frontal structures, especially in coastal regions. I just wanted to again show you, as I mentioned, some examples from the Arctic. This is off the Yukon Delta. The left-hand panel shows you the geography of the region associated with the Yukon and the discharge from Alaska into the Bering Straits and the kind of the Bering Sea area also. And the right-hand panel, the upper one, shows you from the SMAP satellite, the sea surface salinity. And you'll notice again the large freshening event associated with the discharge of the Yukon River. And the bottom panel on the right-hand side shows you also the derivation from the Saildrone deployment as it crosses the area of the Yukon discharge. And again, you see also the freshening associated along that Saildrone track, consistent with what you see in the satellite. So these obviously will lead to gradients, which we're going to be studying in the future in this area also. But I just wanted to show you this as an example also of the sea surface salinity gradients off of Alaska, which is going to be another very interesting area to focus on in the future. And I wanted to also just highlight the comparison, obviously, with sea surface temperature. Again, this is the same area of the Yukon Delta. And you'll notice again in panel B in the upper right-hand corner, again, the Saildrone deployment, and you'll notice the freshening as it crosses the area of the Yukon River discharge. The lower left-hand panel, again, the same map showing the freshening associated from SMAP of the, from the Yukon River. And the right-hand panel, lower right-hand panel D, is again from the sea surface temperature that you see in that area based on the daily optimally interpolated sea surface temperature product from NOAA. And you'll see, obviously, the warm water associated with the discharge from the Yukon in that area very closely resembling the area of the freshening also associated with the Yukon. So very interesting results here. One of the areas is that you see, one of the conclusions is you're seeing both the signals from the Yukon River and both the sea surface temperature and also in sea surface salinity from satellites. And I think this is a very, very encouraging and exciting result. Again, I just wanted to show you these as motivation from some future work that is ongoing now in the Arctic. And going back to the Baja California coast, these are maps showing from about 30 to 45 degrees north. Shows you the gradients co-located to the Saildrone track. So all of these, I really want to thank Shell Gentleman who did all of these co-locations with the Saildrone track of the SMAP and also the Mirror SST. And you'll see in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the remote sensing system derived gradients from Saildrone along the Saildrone track, and also Saildrone is in the left panel A, and the remote sensing system after co-location is in the right-hand panel, and you'll see in both of them very encouraging. You'll see the large gradients in the northern part associated with the major upwelling events off of California. So again, very, very encouraging because this is exactly what the dynamics tells us is happening in this area, and you're seeing it as in these gradients from both Saildrone and also the co-located satellite along these Saildrone deployment tracks. The lower panel C and panel D, the lower panels show you the same. Panel C is the Saildrone derived sea surface temperature gradients along the deployment tracks, and panel D is the Mirror SST, derived gradients along the Saildrone track after it's been co-located and everything. And again, you see the gradients, the large gradients associated with the major upwelling zone off of Northern California and Oregon. So everything you see in these co-located SMAP, Salinity, and Mirror SST are consistent with the known dynamics in this region, and also, consistent with the Saildrone and what it's telling us along these deployments. So again, all of the SMAP, sea surface salinity measurements, and all of the Mirror SST sea surface temperature measurements were co-located to the Saildrone tracks. And I'll just say that this work has already been published, so anybody that wants to have more specific information on the co-location methodology can certainly email me or talk to me, or also just it's described well in the paper. And this just shows you an example of the wavelet technology. In the upper left-hand corner is the JPL, wavelet power spectrum. And it's, again, what we did here is we averaged between in certain latitude bands. This is actually between 38 degrees and 40 degrees north. All of the Saildrone, measurements and the co-located satellite measurements, and then take the wavelet, spectrum versus distance from land. So the x-axis is basically distance from land. The y-axis is actually the scale of the wavelets, and obviously the intensity of the wavelets is what is seen in the color. And the left panel clearly shows that's from the Saildrone, in the upper left-hand panel from the SMAP remote sensing system. And you'll see that both of them align very, very well, in terms of both the Saildrone spectrum and also the SMAP-derived spectrum. They align very well, and you can see that the spatial scales, went from almost 0 to 100 kilometers. And you also notice that the location of the upwelling is about 100 kilometers, around 100 kilometers from shore, which is also what we know exists, that the upwelling scales do not hug the coast in that area, but are actually offshore. And the lower panels show the same thing, but from the sea surface temperature. The left-hand panel C is from the sea surface temperature, and also the right panel is the Mirror SST. And again, there's good there's good agreement between the two, between the Muir SST also and the Saildrone-Derived. And again, the same thing. The x-axis is distance from land, and the y-axis is actually the spatial scale of the wavelet. And then I just wanted to show you quickly, this was also, from a previous paper, we also applied the gradients in the Gulf Stream, and you can see clearly the consistency, and as you see the Saildrone crossing the frontal structures associated with the north wall of the Gulf Stream. And I just wanted to show you quickly also some of the statistics that we derived in the comparison of the gradients between the products, and the Muir SST, I think, I mean, this is just so impressive, had a correlation of 0.81, and the JPL SMAP sea surface salinity derived product had a correlation of 0.58, and the remote sensing system sea surface salinity product had a correlation of 0.65. So I think this is very impressive. All of them were statistically significant. So I think this is very good news in terms of the application of remote sensing, to examine it's in coastal regions, to examine these frontal features. And if you look also at the bias and the the RMS, the root mean square differences, they're consistent with what we've known also in the past, and the biases are almost close to zero, and that's again very, very encouraging for the application of these products. So in conclusion, in terms of future work, comparison of satellite-derived sea surface temperature and sea surface salinity gradients with the Saildrone uncrewed vehicle is encouraging for the application of remote sensing derived salinity and sea surface temperature in coastal regions. Obviously, there are challenges that remain, include improvements in cloud masking for infrared sensors in coastal regions, and improvements in the applications of land contamination in the microwave sensors. And both of these are very active areas of research. And the Saildrone uncrewed vehicle has proved, once again, it has a unique capability for validation of gradients. And high resolution matters. I think this is one of the issues you see, especially within the southern part of the study area. You obviously see sea surface temperature data sets from eco-stress, and also Trishna, I want to say flat out, could be very important in the future, I think, in terms of resolving some of these, areas, where you have upwelling and the submesoscale variability very, very close to land. So I think this is very encouraging for the application of higher resolution derived sea surface temperature, especially from eco-stress, and also the upcoming Trishna mission. And current work that's led by David Wheatley, we in fact are producing a sub-kilometer sea surface temperature data set from eco-stress that with the goal of that will be to actually, incorporate that data set into GRIST once it's developed.